Welcome to the April 27th episode of Reactive Consciousness, our in-depth podcast about what happened this week in pop culture. I am your host, Lotus Prince, and this is...
PyroJackFrost.
And OldManStompy.
So, yeah, we are all here. Vice is still on an extended, mandatory, fiery hiatus, but he will probably be back next time. But for now, the first segment that I wanted to talk about was something I've mentioned several weeks ago, but Samurai Jack, the new season being put up on Adult Swim. I think it was supposed to be maybe 10 episodes long, and we have recently gotten to the 5th episode. And I gotta say, it has been a killer series so far. I think we've mentioned this before, but it's definitely showing that it is on Adult Swim and no longer like Toonami. There's a little more room for blood. There's no real swearing, but there are jokes. There's like innuendo and stuff like that you wouldn't have seen on older episodes. They actually said schmuck in the latest episode, which cracked me up just by its existence. Who says schmuck? Like all of a sudden we got like Jewish like robots of Aku. Like, all right, why not? But I was particularly, like, I haven't been bringing this up every week. I mentioned it for the first time after having seen 2 episodes, but I particularly wanted to bring up the latest episode, the 5th one, because I was so very much impressed by it, because it handled stuff you've seen other shows do in a really interesting manner. I had mentioned on episode 2, there were like 7 assassins coming after Samurai Jack. And it's just like, oh man, where do these people come from? And they're called the Children of Aku. They'd gone through this extremely brutal training regimen for the purpose of basically existing solely to kill Samurai Jack. They're not even really out there to conquer the world or anything. Like, they have one job, and it's to kill this one guy. So they've been coming after him. Jack eventually dispatched most of them, but one was left alive, kind of by coincidence, honestly. And it's one of those deals where it's almost like it's become, like, for the past few episodes, almost a buddy cop thing where neither of them really want to work with the other because they're diametrically opposed. Jack's trying to convince this person of the goodness of life and that he's not evil, Aku is, and the other person's like, yeah, but literally everything I've heard my entire life is that you're the scourge of the earth. So she despises Jack. Jack doesn't hate her, but it's just like, gotta deal with this. But what's been really interesting is that at the end of the 4th episode, Jack has gone off to take care of certain business that could get him killed, and he's got to do it alone. So meanwhile, this person's been left there, and she's been starting to see things in nature that, like, oh man, the world's a little prettier than the underground cave I've been in my entire life, you know, like, whoa, animals interacting with each other, not violently, whoa, the existence of blue sky and flowers and stuff like that, like, okay, so maybe I've been missing a couple things in my life. But what's really been, I thought, extremely clever is the manner in which this latest episode handled the earlier series from like over a decade ago. It's interesting because this is normally where they would do a clip show, but they didn't. Like, they had a couple of clips actually, but the majority of the episode wasn't. It was really fascinating because this person has no idea where Jack went. So she's like, okay, I gotta find Jack. I don't know where he is. So at first, rumor had spread that this person was looking for Jack, because by this point, love him or hate him, everybody knows who Jack is. He's the guy who's against Aku. So these couple of guys overhear about this person looking for Jack, and they're like, excuse me, what's your deal with Jack? Like, you trying to hunt him down because you look the type? And she does. And she's like, no, I'm not trying to hunt him. Actually, I might be trying to help him. I think he might be in danger. And they're like, oh, no kidding? Well, hey, if you're a friend of Jack, then you're a friend of us too. And they take off their hoods and they reveal themselves to be these characters from, like, that one episode in the old series. Like, they're just, like, one of the groups of people Jack has saved across his various adventures. And the episode kind of keeps going like that. They bring back characters that I forgot existed, but I forgot existed because I immediately recognized them upon seeing them. Like, they brought back that like sort of like blaxploitation samurai, like freaking like Dolomite, you know, that kind of samurai, the guy who was on like the Venture Brothers team who hunts Blackulas. Like, he was like the funky samurai. Like, I remember that guy. They brought back those like woolly looking guys from way the hell back. They brought back the archers from like episode 2, like the guys guarding the well that could potentially be a time portal. They brought those guys back, and it's like, oh my god. Like, they brought back the people from the rave, where like the whole episode he was at that one rave fighting that like funky just like dance master martial artist. Like, they brought back all this stuff, and every single time this person is looking for Jack, it's like, oh, he's not here, he might be somewhere else. And she's like, okay, and she goes somewhere else and she sees yet another entire civilization that like worships Jack because he saved their asses from the scourges of some general bad guy or Aku's own forces. And so it's a great way. It's like, again, there were a couple of clips, but they were brief. Most of it was just them talking about how they've been benefited by Jack. So it's a blast from the past, but it manages to be original and not just constantly reuse old footage. So it was a really clever way of handling the source material. So it was just really cool to see this person slowly develop more of a respect for Jack, because by this point it had gotten to the point where it's like, okay, maybe he's not my mortal enemy, but I don't know how I feel about him. But as the episode progressed, it's definitely like, okay, clearly I've been wrong my whole life. Aku is definitely the bad guy. Let's not even talk about that Aku's name is Japanese for evil, but like, aside from that, it's like, okay, I'm actually really allying myself with Samurai Jack for real this time. It was really cool to see a sort of like mental and emotional journey for this one character who was a faceless, voiceless assassin in episode 2 kind of really turn around and become an actual character, while at the same time reliving all this stuff that you may or may not remember from the old show from like when we were kids, like in high school and college. And they're all around, but because 50 years have passed, they're all older and remembering what had happened earlier in the saga. Like, so it was kind of like an emotional episode without being overtly emotional. It was just like an incredible, like, nostalgia just wave. And I thought that it was handled beautifully. So I don't really have too much to go into detail about the episode in regard to like which characters show up. Like, I mentioned a couple of them, but they weren't like key plot characters, you know. It was more like each character that came up was in their own episode of the week, or in their own like Monster of the Week episode. But it was like, I can't go too much into plot details regarding what Jack's doing or specific events that transpire, because I don't want to go into like spoiler territory, because there's actually plot relevant stuff in this episode. But that was such a cool way of acknowledging the old show while keeping it relevant and moving along with the adventures in the new iteration of the show. And, you know, I've seen clip shows before, and it's like an excuse for the producers to be a little more relaxed with producing an episode, because it's like, oh, well, we could just roll the stock footage. But this barely did that. It was again, it retreaded old ground without actually straight up retreading it, and I haven't seen that happen very much before. Not to mention, it had even more of an impact than it would have if the show came out back when it should have. You know, it's been a freaking decade, and it's like, hey guys, remember this? You know, it's kind of like Toy Story 3, where the show the movie got darker and grew up with its audience, and it works because it's been so long since the first Toy Story. So you still remember all these characters, but you could see how they've changed. Like Samurai Jack did that. You know, on one hand, delays of this magnitude kind of suck, but on the other hand, if the developers know how to roll with the punches and actually use it to their advantage, it ironically does something that they couldn't have done if the show had finished a long time ago and it had been produced on schedule. So, like, major kudos to the show and its producers for managing to pull something off like this, because I don't think that's an easy thing to do. So that's a little bit on the quick side, but that's my bit for Samurai Jack. It was just, I'm loving this freaking show.
I don't want to spoil anything on this for the same reason that this is something that I know that both of you guys, as well as a large portion of Lotus Prince's audience, is interested in. But the later parts of Danganronpa also do something very similar.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Have you Pyro? Have you watched the whole Danganronpa saga?
Yep.
Yeah. So there's a
I haven't played the game with his sister.
Oh, the Ultra Despair Girls?
Yeah, but I've played both games and I watched the whole anime.
Okay, so yeah, there's at least 1 or 2 episodes of the anime that really do a good job of sort of closing lingering plot threads that you might not expect to be addressed in the later parts of the series. So that's part of the reason why I keep that's why I keep pushing to find out when you guys are doing Danganronpa 2 as an LP, or maybe doing a Let's Watch of Danganronpa 3, because I genuinely want to see your reactions to it after having enjoyed the first Danganronpa LP so much.
That's why I'm kind of glad they closed everything up, because they closed things up that I didn't even expect them to close up. Like I wasn't even thinking about why certain things happened. Just, hey, they happened, cool, I'll just deal with that. But they actually explained all this stuff that I'm like, wow, this is a lot more detail than I thought they were going to explain, and that they put. I didn't even think that they put this much thought into it. But it's good because now I know going into the next game, I know that this is a totally new game. There really isn't anything that I can think of, at least, from the first series, you could say, that is still open.
Right. So if anything happens to appear from the original Danganronpa trilogy in the new game, then it will be incidental and part of a new storyline.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. I guess kind of like, like it would just serve as a reminder that, like, hey, this is the Danganronpa series, and that's, like, about it, like, something like that.
So it would be like Jotaro appearing in part 6 of
that's right. Yeah,
like,
he's
really...
there, but okay.
or Joseph appearing in part 4, to use an analogy that Lotus Prince would.
Yeah, no, that's better. Yeah, he's clearly like he's ancillary at best, but I like Joseph.
He's a legacy character. He's there for the people who like him.
Yeah, and like mentioning at least Dio's name in every single part that I'm aware of, even in part 6. Like there's flashing back to it. It's just kind of funny. Yeah, I'm starting to go into what we're not supposed to go into.
We committed the cardinal sin of getting.
You woke the dragon. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what I had to say about Samurai Jack. Just I freaking love this series, and they're really they're just killing it each episode. Like I don't know how long it took them to actually put this stuff together, because it's only 10 episodes, but it looks like a whole lot of effort went into making them like as high quality as they can be in terms of the visuals and the writing.
Yeah, I never actually watched all of Samurai Jack when it was on Toonami, I guess it was. I only watched a few. My brother loved it. I think he may have watched all of it, but I didn't. And it's actually surprising, I thought, when they said they were going to release this new 10-episode series. I knew it did well, but I didn't know it did well enough that they were going to come back to it this many years later.
Yeah, well, that was the thing, is that I saw most of the episodes, but by the time it got to the point where it's like, okay, the series is going to end, but they'd already had a hiatus for that, and then they're like, okay, we're airing the ending now, but I didn't know when it was, like what time it was supposed to be or whatever. Like, it just kind of, at least for me, showed up out of nowhere, so I never saw how the old series ended. And apparently it was like a non-ending, so it was a disappointing way to end the series. So I had heard talk of Samurai Jack coming back, this year, but I mean, I didn't know it would be this year. It was one of those things like the movie It, like Stephen King's It, the new one. I'd heard them talking about this for freaking years, but alright, wake me when they actually are gonna make it, and now we have a trailer. It's like, oh really? It was the same thing with Samurai Jack. I wasn't even following it, and all of a sudden I saw people posting on Twitter, hey, the new episode's on right now, and I'm like, oh, really? They're actually okay, I guess I'll turn the TV on, I'll see what happens. I wasn't even invested in it. I'm like, let's turn it on, and it kicked so much ass. I've actually been, following closely now. So,
and to add to that, I don't know if you both heard, but they're actually creating a new Carmen Sandiego TV show.
Yeah, I did hear about that.
Netflix. Yeah. That is explaining how she became the world's greatest thief.
Wait, seriously?
Yes.
Do you need to know that? Like, I like Carmen Sandiego just as, like, she's an excuse for you to learn about geography.
Yeah. I will say that, like, between the game show and the original, like, cartoon series, like, Carmen Sandiego was like the final boss, and like it was almost her mystique that made her such an interesting character that it was so hard to get a hold of her.
You never even see her face. Like, she always has her hat over her eyes, and it's like, oh, it's Carmen Sandiego. And like whenever you get close to her, she like just whips out like a drop down rope ladder from a helicopter and just like disappears. It's like you're never catching her. Like, I know you could in the game show, but that was a game show. Like, in terms of canonical plot in the cartoon, like it doesn't happen. She's too cool for that. She just disappears.
I'll agree that this story might not have need to been told, but at the same time, I'm curious what it's going to be about, because we'll see. I mean, other than playing the game, like the old Broderbund games, and if it was Broderbund,
it was,
and watching the game show, I really didn't have, like, let's say, an interest in Carmen Sandiego. But when I heard this, I'm like, interesting. And actually, the first thing that it brought up to mind again was the acapella.
Yeah,
sung at the beginning of the game show. Yeah,
the group Rockapella. I love those guys.
I will also add to Carmen Sandiego. I don't know if you guys have heard about this or even how accurate the rumor is, but I've heard they're starting on an Invader Zim movie to complete that.
I heard that they're continuing Invader Zim also.
Yeah, I didn't know it was a movie, but I heard Invader Zim was coming back in some capacity. I didn't watch much of that, but that was a funny show.
That's another series where, like, on television, it got kind of a decent conclusion with a Christmas special. Which is pretty good, and then on the DVD release, they released some mastered episodes that never made it onto TV.
Oh, cool.
And that also ended on an episode which was interesting, but not really a full finale. And there was definitely at least like another season and a half worth of episodes scripted out, including a conclusion, where like Dib leads a coalition of all the races that were enslaved originally by Zim's people, and then they take over the Zim's home planet.
Oh, wow.
So, I don't know. I'm happy to see that story is getting the conclusion that it deserves, because it made a lot of kids happy.
I find it really interesting that, like, so many of our childhood shows are coming back, like, all the same time. Like, I remember seeing on Twitter
it's because all the people who watch these shows are our age now, who can make these shows.
No, it does make sense, but the fact that they're actually making them, it's like...
And everybody else has the money to pay for those shows.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I remember seeing on Twitter, there was a post of, like, it was a movie marquee, and it was, like, now playing Ghost in the Shell, Beauty and the Beast, Power Rangers, and someone, like, captioned it, like, what year is it? And it's, like, it's so weird. Like, it's one thing to bring back a franchise that we know, but they're all coming back. Like, remember that stuff you watched as a kid? Here you go. It's not even, like, reboots. Like, just the shows are coming back. I mean, Carmen Sandiego's a new thing. Like, it's a new iteration. But, like, Invader Zim, we're just continuing the story. Samurai Jack, we're continuing the story. It's like, wow, okay. Like, so it's really cool to see all this happening, and all at once. Like, man, whoever grew up in the 80s and 90s has got to be super happy right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is the idea behind the 20-year rule, that's about how long it takes for a kid to enjoy something and then grow up and have enough purchasing power to demand that product be revived.
But like the thing is, that's always happened. You know, like, we always get that kind of stuff, and sometimes it comes off a little clunky. Like, finally, the comic book movies I've always wanted, but the ones in the 90s were kind of shaky, like, quality may vary. And, you know, but now we have the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which, you know, it has the same kind of feel for every movie, but each movie is very high quality in its own right. You know, people have been doing the 20-year rule for I don't even know how long, but, like...
More than 20 years.
Yeah, but, like... but do you actually know how to make that movie? Do you know why you liked it? Are you sure you aren't going to make, like, a really crappy movie or a crappy reboot of the TV series? But, like, again, Samurai Jack is coming back with the same quality, arguably better. Like, it's just really cool to see when it actually comes out successfully. So yeah, that's my spiel on Samurai Jack and I guess 90s nostalgia and some 80s. So yeah, Pyro, I believe you also have your fair share of stuff to discuss.
Yeah, I figured why not talk about Persona 5 some more? I mean, I know we can't get enough of it. I know I can't get enough of it. And actually, I figured, why don't I use this time to talk about more than just Persona 5 because I think the cool thing about Persona 5, and here's how I'll get into the story, is, and I mentioned this I think 2 weeks ago when I started talking about it, is how it brings in a bunch of other elements from Mega 10 games into the Persona series. So, interestingly enough, Persona 1 and 2 were very much spin-offs of the Mega 10 game, where you were fighting against demons or mythological type creatures, and you had to talk to them. But they didn't necessarily join your party. In Persona 2, at least I remember, when you talked to them and convinced them to help you out at least, they gave you tarot cards, which you could then use to summon these personas. But then in 3, I think partially because it was them bringing back a series that was gone for a long time, they totally changed that in the sense of you're not even fighting mythological creatures, you're fighting shadows now, which looked just like random things. I don't even know if they had any theme to them at all other than they looked evil in some way. And you got your personas by this thing at the end of a battle that you had a random chance of a card showing up that is a persona that you could get. And then in 4 they made it better because now you can select what card you get. You could pick a persona or you could pick other abilities. But it's very much you're fighting these enemies that you're not using in battle. And the ones you get in battle are randomly given to you, let's say, or you can randomly select them when you beat a battle. So 5 is cool because it brings back demon conversations. And like the way they do it, I think I mentioned before, is really cool because it's the hold-up mechanic. If you hit all the enemies' weaknesses at the same time, all your characters circle them with their guns drawn, and it says hold up. And you can either all-out attack them, which means you all do massive damage and most likely kill them all. You can either talk to them, or I believe you can just go back to normal battle if you want to. I don't know why you would do that. But then, like I said, talking is back. It's a little bit more fluid than most Mega 10 games, because that is one thing that in most games really sucked. So let me rephrase that. It was a great thing, but the way that it went about it was annoying. So you'd fight an enemy, and it would ask you this question with 3 different answers, and you'd have to pick the right one. But the same enemy might like different answers randomly.
Yeah, so there's no definitive guide on how to convince a particular enemy.
Well, there was like a family preference. Like, similar kinds of demons wanted to be treated in the same way, but you would never know that. It would be generated like by encounter.
Yeah, by encounter, but there would even be a little bit of randomness where there might be an enemy who has this certain family type, and you answered this question the one way, and he's like, oh, cool, awesome. But if you answer another way, he'd be like, no, I don't like that answer. So it wasn't the best, but in this game, you know that a certain answer will always work, so that's nice.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing was in previous games, including the mainline Mega 10 games, they could bug you for a long time. Like, they'd ask you a question, then they'd say, all right, well, I won't join you unless you give me money. So you give them some money. It's like, well, I want more money. So you give them some money. All right, you have to answer this other question. You answer that question. All right, I want this item. You say no. And they're like, all right, well, I want this item. You say no. And they might be like, all right, cool, I'll join you. There's like a long series of requests for money or items or health or SP or just random questions. And if they liked you enough from that, they would join you. There were even some enemies that you had to deny all the requests, and that's the only way they'll join you.
To show that you're assertive or something, like aggressive?
I don't even know. It's really just, to me, it felt completely random most of the time, and I feel like I got lucky when it worked. Whereas in this game, they only ask you 2 questions, and that's it. And depending on how good your answers were for how they liked it, they might join you or not.
You know what that actually kind of reminds me of? Not so much in terms of randomness, but just bringing something, like we mentioned in Corrective, bringing something back to the Yakuza series, where you could go to hostess clubs and date hostesses, and during their conversations, they'll have questions for you that you'll need to answer. but they're usually specific to a particular hostess. But in Yakuza, for example, 2, the list of questions was so gigantic. Like, you can look up a guide for it, but it is absolutely insane. And you have to, like, look up this giant-ass page of questions and Control F it and, like, see if you could find what to do. It's brutal. Whereas in later Yakuza games, there's, like, a very limited set of questions they ask, and sometimes they're even directly related to, like, the side quest part of their dating them, so it's actually, like a fluid, almost plot level of conversation, and it's just, like, so much more streamlined. It's, like, one of the better things that happened to the games.
And I find it interesting because it feels like they're slowly turning Persona into a mainline Mega 10 in the way that they're bringing back demon conversations. They're bringing back 2 new elements they have in this game. So the original Persona 2 had fire, water, wind, earth, ice, nuclear, almighty, light, dark, and I'm probably missing a couple.
It's too many.
And then, yeah. And then in 3, when they brought it back, there was just fire, ice, lightning, force or wind. They are interchangeable, light and dark. Whereas in 5, they brought back nuclear, and they also have psychic damage now. So it's like they're bringing back all these types. That seems like they're slowly turning Persona back into what it was in 4. Also, the dungeons aren't randomized anymore. They're very much constructed to be a certain way, which is great. And they have the demon conversations back, which is amazing. Also, you're fighting actual demons, not just shadows. They're called shadows still, but they're actual mythological creatures you're fighting again, which I really enjoy because I thought the shadows were cool from 3 and 4, but they didn't seem to fit the Mega 10 universe.
But, you know, I don't know how this compares to older Persona games because I haven't really seen gameplay of almost any of them. Maybe, like, for battles, I think I might have only seen 5. I just did Mr. Ryu's when I was last there. But, so, correct me if this is different from anything, but the whole shadows, oh wait, they're actually demons, that kind of reminds me of partly Earthbound in terms of being able to jump them from behind for a quick hit when the actual battle screen starts, or vice versa, they get you from behind. But I'm also reminded of Tales of, maybe even Symphonia, where the enemy appears as some black shape cruising around the world map, but when you actually touch it, you see what you're actually fighting.
So in 3 and 4, the way it worked was it was like a black blob that you could hit. If you hit it before it hits you, you get you attack first, or vice versa. And if you attack it when it doesn't notice you, you get the first attack. And if you attack it normally, whatever. But the enemies themselves obviously looked like enemies. Yeah. And then, like you saw it in 5. The cool thing about 5 again is the fact that you can like rush up to them and you pull their mask off and they explode into the creatures that you fight. So it's similar in that sense, I guess you could say, to those games. And the cool thing, like Earthbound, they have a new mechanic that one of your confidants can unlock. So the confidants are with the S-links in this game. They're people that you hang out with in your real life that unlock more abilities you can do in game. If you hang out with one of your party members enough, he gets the ability that you instant kill enemies that are a certain level lower than you.
I was actually wondering if that was the case because Earthbound has that, and
it sucks.
The amount of time you save with that, though, if you just bump into an enemy from behind and you're level like 1,000,000, it's level 1, you just kill it. Do we really need the battle screen for this? Like, okay, it's done. Like, I guess it's different than Persona because maybe you want to get the demons to join you. That could be a different case, but otherwise, I like the efficiency.
It's the exact opposite of what you mentioned.
Really?
So if you instant kill an enemy, you get no money or experience, but you do get a persona.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
But I prefer the other way around because I can always go to the Velvet Room and purchase a demon if I want it. That I'll already probably have. But I really want to be able to grind because to conserve... So you know that you're a good level in a dungeon when you can fight enemies and just physical attack them to death. Because SP, if you run out of your points to use skills, you are most likely going to die. Because if you can't hit their weaknesses and you can't kill them quickly enough, they're going to kill you. So if you can kill them with physical attacks, that means you're strong enough to be able to grind through that dungeon. But now they have it where if I'm too high of a level, I instant kill the easy guys, so I need SP to actually grind levels.
Oh.
So I'm now out of SP, so I have to leave the dungeon, come back another day, which I'm wasting a day that I could be hanging out with friends. So
that's frustrating.
Just like real life.
Because, yeah, the thing I liked about Earthbound was you would get everything from the fight, including item drops. Just, like, you don't have to go through the actual fight, because it's like, we know it's a 100-hour RPG, we're not doing this.
I don't even think that you get items. I think the only thing you could get is a Persona.
That's a nuisance.
So, yeah, but I will say that the one benefit of it is it's a really cool effect, because you tear the enemy's mask off, and it has that, like, blood kind of splurting out of it.
Yeah.
But it's... you and the enemy turn black, and the background turns red, so it's very stylized.
Yeah, Persona 5 is all about the black and red aesthetic.
Yeah, and the game is so stylized, it's amazing.
What I'm curious about, sort of rolling back to your comments about Persona becoming more like mainline SMT, is that I'm curious if Persona is sort of becoming the mainline SMT, because, yeah.
That's a very good question. In terms of the amount of people who play it, I would say yes. I would say Persona is more played than the mainline, because I think it's more accessible than mainline. Although 5 is kind of bringing back a lot of the, not, I don't want to say cheap deaths, but you need to really be paying attention to what's going on, because enemies can instant kill you. And the other thing is, in Persona 5, you are playing as the main character. If the main character dies, it's game over. Oh. So you really have to be paying attention to enemies that use instant death abilities, and you really need to pay attention to weaknesses. Because I would say 3 and 4 were definitely more accessible than the mainline, but I think because people seem to like these more, they are seeming to be the mainline. Because even Persona has its own spin-offs. Persona 4 had a fighting game. It had a dungeon crawler. It had a dancing game.
And if I recall, I had been thinking about this when the spin-off series Devil Survivor was released, because the second one had S-Links when the first one didn't, and it was like the Persona series was starting to leak into the SMT game, the other SMT games. I mean, after that, SMT4 and SMT4 Final came out, and I think neither of them had anything resembling
they did
what
not.
makes Persona games unique, besides taking place in Japan.
Wait, what was I'm sorry, this is just really quick. What was Devil Survivor a spin-off of?
It was just its own story, basically. Devil Survivor was the Tactics.
Okay.
Mega 10 game. And actually, there were Tactics games earlier. I think they were called Last Bible. But
I've heard of those.
They didn't. I don't think they did well enough. So now the Devil Survivor kind of started it over again. Although, when was the last one? The last one came out a while ago. I don't even know if they're making a third one.
Yeah,
I don't think
they were both on PS2, right?
They both got re-released. No, they were DS games.
And
they were DS games, and then they got re-released for the 3DS with extra story chapters and voice acting.
I'm sorry, I was confusing them with Digital Devil Saga.
Digital Devil Saga, yes, which did not have S-Links. And actually, Digital Devil Saga was very much a basic JRPG. Okay. You fought demons, and there were weaknesses, but each character was its own character, and you had your party that you could switch party members in and out, kind of like Persona, I guess you could say. But the cool thing about it is the main characters in battle turned into demons, and you had the ability to eat enemies, which gave you this other experience that you could use to buy more abilities.
Huh.
So technically, you could level. I did in the second one. You can level up all your characters enough that they all have all the abilities, and you become basically God. Like nothing can hurt you. Although, just like most Mega 10 games, there's the secret boss where if you null any damage, they'll turn to a second moveset which decimates you. Like most secret bosses in these games, you cannot null anything or they'll decimate you. Because there's one ability type called Almighty, which can go through any defense. And normally, like a secret boss will have its usual routine of abilities that it'll use. But if you null anything, it'll just Almighty you to death, and you can't block it. So it'll just do 99999 damage, like until it kills you.
What do you mean if you null something? Like on?
So there's skills that you can equip that'll say null fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I've heard SMT is really punishing if you ever try buffing or debuffing the boss, like buffing yourself or something.
Well,
Only
no,
the secret
actually,
bosses.
most fights you're supposed to really take advantage of buffs and debuffs to make them survivable.
Yep, your first turns are increase your defense, increase your attack, increase your agility, and then your turns after that are decrease the enemies, stuff like that. Then you have one turn basically, or 2 turns of doing damage. Then you do that all again because your buffs ran out.
Oh, I didn't know you were allowed to debuff the enemies. All right.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes the primary strategy is to use a spell that nulls debuffs. If the boss buffs itself, oftentimes the only way to make that boss fight survivable is to debuff the boss using one of your turns, forcing the boss to use one of its turns to buff itself up, so that it isn't trying to kill you with buff stats with both of its turns.
And because the other thing is, to keep it fair, I guess you could say, bosses usually have, at least in the latest Mega 10 game 4, bosses have usually 2 turns, like in a row. So to kind of make it more fair to yourself is like what OldManStompy said, you buff yourself or debuff them or whatever, so they have to spend one of those turns canceling that, and their second turn actually attacking you.
So brutal.
And then you have to spend one of your turns buffing or debuffing, the second turn healing yourself, and then you only have 2 people left to actually attack.
Oh god.
To give it context, in Shin Megami Tensei 3, which is Nocturne for the PS2, and I think something else. What else?
It's just Nocturne, yeah.
Well, it was re-released for something else with a different secret character because the PS2 one had
featuring Dante from Devil May Cry.
I don't remember that one actually. Maniacs was the one that had.
It was re-released with Raito Kuzunoha, who was the main character from the Devil Summoner sub-series, which is the action RPG version of Mega 10.
Yes. Yep. That took place in like the 1980s.
Yeah. So in Nocturne, some of the enemies had a skill called Dragon Eye that would take one of their turns and give them 4 turns.
Ugh.
So if you didn't have them spend one of their turns debuffing, then they would just murder you with their 4 extra turns.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Atlas is notorious for being one of the most player-unfriendly companies prior to From Software sort of taking that crown.
And Nocturne was like the particularly hard one, right?
Just like Devil Survivor, these games are hard, but they are fair if you understand the systems very well.
Yeah, no, I was just asking, like, SMT is a notoriously hard company, but even for them, Nocturne was, like, the hard one.
From what I remember, yeah, it was hard. One of the harder ones out of the ones I played.
Like, it's like what I heard about...
I know you've talked about this before, but Digital Devil Saga, the secret boss from that is the protagonist from Nocturne, and it's well known as arguably the hardest secret boss fight in like role-playing game history.
Yeah.
Outside of like some MMORPG fights that take 12 hours to kill.
That also reminds me, I remember, I don't know how things have changed since then, but I remember hearing about what used to be Japanese exclusive, but I think with the PSP release of Persona 1, we got that like extra dungeon.
Well, so that was in the... I think that was in the original American one, but it was just really hard to get. I don't remember exactly, but I know it's the Ice Queen quest. I know what you're talking about.
Because I remember looking up, this is one of those things, I don't know, I have no idea why I was doing this, but I was on GameFAQs, or maybe I was on some list or something. Maybe it was one of those top 10 lists or whatever of like hardest dungeons or hardest secrets in a game or whatever, and I remember seeing like a lot of times people use hyperbole in those lists, and I remember seeing like, oh, the Ice Queen dungeon in Persona 1 is like easily the hardest dungeon in any game, and I'm like, okay, but like I remember looking it up on GameFAQs, and some of the stuff that was going on, I don't even remember what they were at this point, but we're just like, they sounded just brutally unfair. I was like, you might actually have me with this one. I don't know. It's always entertaining to see someone say, oh, it's the hardest, and then you look up why, and like they're totally right.
Yeah, I actually never beat the Ice Queen dungeon. I don't even think I even started it, because when I played 1, it was after 3, actually, I believe.
Wow.
So it was so far back that it wasn't a bad game, and actually was still decent enough for what it was, but again, random battles weren't fun. The battle system wasn't the best, and once I beat it, because it was my first time actually playing Persona 1, I was like, I'm done with Persona 1. I beat it, I don't really want to play it again. Whereas in 2, I beat both stories in that. In 3, I did, I think, most of what that offered, especially even the remake of it.
I was about to ask, did you ever play as the female protagonist?
Yep, and it was the same game. but a female protagonist. It wasn't anything special, like most people seem to make it out to be.
Oh.
I didn't play The Answer, which is supposed to be the follow-up to Persona 3 that had like an additional story, because I didn't really like how it was done, and it wasn't interesting enough to keep going. So I guess I haven't played all of 3. In 4, I did all of that stuff. I'm actually wondering if 5 has some secret boss. And I think I heard that it does have a secret boss but you have to beat the game once. Which brings me back into where I am in 5, actually. So I'm almost done with the 3rd dungeon. And again, the dungeons are really cool because they are constructed to be a really interesting dungeon. So without much spoilers, all the dungeons reflect what the person, how the person views their surroundings. Mm-hmm. Their desires are so great that this metaverse, which is the collective unconsciousness, which is kind of partially where we got the podcast.
I was going to say corrective unconsciousness.
It molds that portion of the metaverse to their desires. So the first guy, his dungeon was a castle because he saw the school as a castle. So when you go into the metaverse to where the school is, it's a castle, and you try to break into his castle. The second boss, and I'll talk about the first 3 bosses because they are early enough in the game and the spoilers really aren't there that much. So the second boss is this artist who you break into his house. Not really break into his house, but in the metaverse, it's a museum because he thinks of his work as that amazing that everyone wants to come to see his museum.
That's clever.
And then the third boss, so the really cool thing about the third boss is he's, I guess, what you could consider like a Yakuza. Not a Yakuza, but he has been taking money from people. And you're wondering that you know that he sees something as his bank, but what does he see as his bank? They're trying to say like, oh, an actual bank, oh, the school, oh, whatever. They find out that all of Shibuya he sees as his bank.
Actually, here's a question about that. I don't know if the game does this, but do you ever re-explore the same building, like the school, as different things? Like one guy sees it as a castle, someone else sees it as something else, so you can have this a completely different dungeon in the same space. You know, like Dead Space 2, when you re-enter the Ishimura, but everything's changed, and you're like, whoa, like, did they do any of that?
I'm only like a third of the way in, so I don't even know, but I want to say no, because actually they could, because when you think about it, though, at the same time it would not be, because their desire is the greatest in that area that would mold that. So if my desire for the school was a castle, then that means that my desire is more than anyone else in the school. So I shaped that reality. But I think now that I've beaten that guy, maybe someone else might see it as something else, but I kind of think they won't, because I kind of think that they're trying to let you break into different things.
You would reuse assets.
Well, not that, but you first break into a castle, then you break into a museum, then you break into a bank. I heard that you break into a casino, and I heard you break into, like, they're all like usual heist movie locations that you're breaking into.
Sure.
So I think that's a really cool way they do that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the bosses are interesting. So it was really cool because the bosses in 3, I'm just going to go to 3, were all related to different tarot cards. So you fought the Hierophant, you fought the Lovers, you fought the Emperor and Empress, and I think you actually fight all or most of the tarot cards.
I was just about to ask, do you fight the world?
No, but that's because your character is supposed to be the world, basically.
Oh, okay. Because I just love seeing interpretations of that with obviously JoJo, but also like House of the Dead. Like, how are you the Empress? Let's find out. Like, it's just kind of interesting to see how anyone interprets those kinds of things.
In Persona 3, it was an important part of the story. Like the initial aspect, like the first half of the storyline, was directly related to like the Fool's Journey.
Yeah,
like a story based on the tarot cards. So I'm curious now that you've mentioned that how whether or not that aspect of the mythology is also tied into the story.
Yeah, and I should mention. Well, I should mention real quick. Like, it's not.
Okay.
No, I should mention even real quick. Like Persona 3, I'm guessing the tarot, but definitely the concept of you shooting yourself to break out your persona, that actually is directly inspired by JoJo Part 3. Like the whole existence of the tower representing a persona, the personas being stands, and there's just a moment in the beginning where Jotaro tries shooting himself with a gun to show that his stand/persona exists and like catches the bullet. So I didn't realize that Persona 3 was so heavily reliant on the tarot system, but it makes perfect sense considering where it's coming from.
Well, I mean, Persona 1 and 2 were also heavily reliant on the tarot cards.
Oh, did they? So that might just be a coincidence.
Yeah, it was just coincidence, I think.
All right.
But the whole shooting yourself in the head might have come from JoJo, but the way they explained it is more that you are... So that it's not a real gun.
No, of course. They're not copying it, but just like the animation, like the action is reminiscent of that one part.
But then like their explanation is that you're by doing that, you're having the feeling of killing yourself, so your body will release its inner self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of how it worked in JoJo. Like, again, Jotaro was just like, I have an evil spirit inside me. Want me to prove it to you? And he shoots himself because he would have died if the spirit hadn't jumped out and done something. So it's like, see what I'm talking about? It's just like, whoa.
And then it's funny because the bosses in 3 were very much the fool's journey, because that was like them. That was the story there. Whereas in 4, it's very much you're facing your true self. So most, if not all, the bosses in 4 were the shadow version of the characters that you're trying to rescue. So it reflected their deepest desires, or not their desires, what they were trying to hide about themselves. Mm-hmm. So one of the characters is very much likes to see her friend as, like, her friend is considered prettier than her and gets more guys, but she likes that she, in a way, has control over her. So her shadow self is a dominatrix. So it's something that she's trying to hide about because she's not happy about it, but it's kind of an aspect of her personality that she's trying to hide. So
like a
that's
guilty
what her shadow
pleasure.
self is like. Yeah, and that was very much like Persona 2, because in Persona 2 you fight against your shadow selves as well. But the whole releasing your personas is kind of lame, because it's really just this card appears in front of them and they crush it. It's kind of like, okay, that's interesting. But 5 is actually really cool because, again, now you're fighting against other people's inner selves, and the bosses really reflect that. So the first boss, again, he sees the school as his castle, and he thinks he can do whatever he wants. So he has like 4 arms. One is carrying a volleyball because he's a volleyball coach, and he punishes them. One is carrying a whip, and there's a person leaning over that he's like whipping basically into shape. One of them is carrying a glass of wine with women's legs out of it, because he sees women as, like, the girls as his playthings. And I forget what his other arm is doing, but he very much, it's a it really shows what his desires, not how he sees himself, but about, like, the dark version of himself. So that was really cool. But the way that they summon their personas in 5 is actually interesting, because they all wear masks, and they rip the mask off, but it's a lot more gruesome than you might think. So when they first summon their persona, they rip their mask off, and they're actually in pain. And where their mask was is bleeding.
Yeah, I was going to say the ripping part of, like, their face off, kind of.
Yeah. So it's really cool how that's done, and it's back to, like, personas being... Because a persona, for those of you who don't know, persona is, like, Latin for mask. And so you're actually ripping off your mask to show your persona. You're ripping off your one persona to show another one of your personas.
Nice. I mean, I do remember that in 3, like, of course it's interesting that they use guns and that they point guns to their heads and shoot themselves to get the personas out, but that's basically sort of used for shock value once, and then nobody really mentions it anymore. Like, they use it in the opening scene to make you wonder what's going on, and then people just sort of accept it as fact, and nobody really gets squeamish about it.
Yeah.
So that's why I really liked 5. Like, again, 5, the summoning looks cool. Like, it's... If anything, its style is great. And, they really fixed everything. Like, I didn't really like the social links that much, because the whole doing things like having friends during the day was kind of stupid. I felt like it was kind of dumb for an RPG, but they really rehashed it enough that, again, they renamed it so it's confidants. They're helping you be thieves, whether they know it or not. So I like how they changed the name to reflect the whole theme of the game. Also, they made it a lot easier to know when you're going to rank up your confidants, when originally you had to, like, guess if that was going to happen or not. And all the confidants help you out. So originally in 3, there was no benefit other than when you fuse personas, you would get more experience, and you would be able to use better personas. That was it in 3. Then in 4, they kept that, but also when you became friends with your main characters, they got abilities in battle, such as being able to cure status effects, taking a hit for you it's like taking an instant kill hit for you. If you didn't down an enemy, there's a chance they would follow up. But again, all the other S-Link people didn't do anything. And then in 5, all of your confidants help you out in some way. Whether they let you get more money in battle, make it easier to talk to enemies in battle, make it easier for you to rank up people outside of the dungeon, whether they let your non-party member, like non-in-your-party members get experience, so they all help you out, which is great. They really seem to improve all of the systems.
Mm-hmm. The Persona 4 one was already a large improvement, especially because Persona 4 also had the mechanic where you get a game over if your protagonist dies, and if you have one of your other party members S-Links it, even at rank 1, then they'll absorb a fatal hit for you, which is kind of funny when you think about it, that like you just barely became friends, but they will now die for you.
Yeah, that's not until like rank 8 or 9 now in 5.
Okay.
And actually, it's cool because the party members all do like the different ranks they have are all cool things. So 1, they have a new ability called Baton Pass, where if you hit an enemy's weakness, you can give that extra turn you'd get to another party member with increased attack damage.
Yes, fantastic.
So if there's 3 enemies, one's weak against fire, one's weak against ice, one's weak against lightning, let's say, and you hit the fire one, you can pass that extra turn to someone who can use lightning to hit the lightning guy's weakness, and might also kill him because they do more damage. Then they get an extra turn, which they can then pass the baton to another character. So it really lets you chain attacks, which is great. Also, there's a chance that if you screw up your talking at one of their ranks, they'll help you talk to the enemies. There's one where they will, again, heal status effects. One will they'll take a hit for you. One will they'll follow up with an attack. Then, just like in 4, the final rank 10, they'll get a super persona, which always looks worse than the starting persona, but their skills are better at least. And it's one of those reasons, the obvious reason why the starting persona, obviously you want to look better because you're going to see that through most of the game, but it still doesn't sit well with me that I've gotten my friend's friendship to rank 10 and your persona looks like shit, and now I have to deal with that for the rest of the game.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, kind of an anticlimax.
So that's why I'm never going to get any of your friendships to rank 10. You're going to stay at 9.
Oh no.
My persona would be old. Just be a giant beard. Like,
yes. Or
but I mean, like, that's
sheep.
That's as far as I can think of now, all I want to talk about 5. I mean, again, I'm only a third of the way through the game, so I don't have as much to talk about. But I'm hoping to play more this week if I don't play Final Fantasy 14.
Nice.
And I'll be able to talk more about 5 after that.
So right now, on the PS4, when I have a chance to play it, I'm playing like Bloodborne, Uncharted 4, Final Fantasy 15, like all the games that you were playing like several weeks ago. And
so now
eventually I'm going
that.
to get Persona 5, and I might get back into Final Fantasy 14. I played like 3 times just to try it out, and I probably would like to get past the story. So I will gladly welcome my role as Pyro, but like 3 months behind.
And I'll get to relive all the fun times I've had playing and talking about it.
Exactly. I think we made this reference the first time I replaced you on the podcast, that I was here to relive the times back when Pyro was still funny.
Well,
all right, so that's all I got.
It seems to cover the topics.
I mean, I love the Persona games. I had never managed to beat a Mega 10 game. Several of them have been released in America, if you know where to look for them, although they span a lot of genres and a lot of systems. But they were always like a large time investment, and it always made me pretty anxious because they're fairly difficult games and they require a lot of forethought.
And I would like to talk about them more too, like in a future podcast, because again, most of this podcast is just about Persona. And again, there's many Mega 10 games, and even though I consider myself, I guess, out of the group of us, the expert, I by no means have beaten every single Mega 10 game. Although that is hopefully a goal of mine, and I'll be able to do it, but it's not going to happen for a while.
Have you played the older ones, like the translated versions of the NES games and the Super Nintendo games?
I've played this Shin Megami Tensei 1. I don't remember if I beat it. I haven't played 2. I haven't played any of the NES ones, though.
Don't forget
those are the ones where you like actually fight God in one of them, I think.
Oh,
you fight God in almost all of them.
Well, you fight like you fight Lucifer a lot, but very rarely. Like they actually call it like YHWH in the
I don't
game,
know if you know, but he's the boss of 4.
Which 4? Oh, SMT 4?
Yeah, you fight Yahweh.
No, I did not know that, but that would make it a return to form, because I don't really think it's that common. You definitely don't fight him in 3.
In 3, you fight Lucifer in the he's the neutral ending, the true ending boss is you fight Lucifer.
But
you fight Lucifer to take control of his army.
Harass the Digital Devil Saga people.
Yes, but it's funny because you fight Lucifer in 3 to prove to him that you can take control of his army to fight God.
That's unbelievable.
Right.
By the way, I think I've mentioned this before, although maybe not in the podcast, but don't forget the Japanese exclusive SMT some kind of game for the original Xbox. There's something out there.
Oh, is there?
There's some kind of game made by Megaten on the Xbox.
Okay. There's also Maken X for the Dreamcast, I think. Or is that Saturn?
I've always wanted to play that because it's like kind of like an FPS or a third-person shooter.
Yeah.
But I don't have it. I can never find it.
I think I've seen it once at like Otakon. It's not cheap.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about all I have for Mega 10 this week at least.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Well,
so yeah, that covers both Blast from the Past with various cartoons and series coming back. We got our Persona fix and SMT. So that's the show for this week. Please remember to subscribe to the Corrective Consciousness YouTube and SoundCloud pages, and while there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps us promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement keeps the show going. You could also catch us on Tuesday for our sister podcast, Corrective Consciousness, the podcast about our lives in pop culture. And as I mentioned last time, you could find Vice as Vice the Bold on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, and Twitter, and you can find me as Lotus Prince on YouTube and at Lotus Prince, all one word, on Twitter.
You can find me as PyroJackFrost or Cloud08540 on various media. If I'm not there, I probably don't have one. And I'm actually going to ask Vice the Bold to advertise me now when I can't be on.
And of course, you can find me as OldManStompy basically everywhere I want to be found. That includes PSN, Twitter. That's about it. I'm also currently the community manager on the Facebook page, so you're welcome to check us out there. Although there's basically nothing there right now except other links to the podcast you're already listening to. So take it for what it is.
All right. Well, once again, thank you all so much for listening. Until next time, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.